The Mario Kart series has seen some incredible tracks throughout its 30 plus years. Despite most tracks being based on many themes already established in the Mario franchise, I feel as if the track design has always been able to elevate those themes to some incredibly memorable courses. I mean, Mushroom Gorge is just the World 1 theme, but that course is one of the most iconic Mario Kart tracks. So in seeing how well Nintendo is able to transform their generic themes into memorable race courses, I wanted to observe how well they're able to do the same, but for their characters. It's interesting to see how certain characters are represented in the series. Like, visually, I think Rosalina's Ice World is a great showcase of her character. It has a lot of galaxy references, and in my opinion, the Icy course represents the vibe of Rosalina. Some other tracks don't do this very well, like every Mario circuit kinda has me asking, what about this is Mario themed? But I digress. So I wanted to rank and discuss which character has the best courses within the Mario Kart series. But in order to do this, I've made a couple of rules. Firstly, I compiled all the character courses within the series. However, I'm only counting the characters that have at least 2 tracks to their name. This is so there's at least a bit of an average for each character. To my surprise, this only eliminates 3 characters, that being Rosalina, Boo, and Thwomp. Secondly, it only counts if the character's name appears in the title, so although the Ghost Valleys are kinda Boo's track, it's not explicitly their track. I've decided that the arcade tracks won't count. I played a bit of those games and I just don't think they hold up compared to the mainline courses. Lastly, there are multiple different versions of some of these tracks, as many courses have been remade, especially with the older tracks. So to simplify things, I'm just going to include one version of the track, and that will be whatever I consider to be the best version. Now, with the tier list being finished, I've determined an average rank for each character, not based on their tier, but rather their rank out of all 72 character tracks. And the character with the lowest rank is... Now, for one of the main Mario characters, Peach barely has any tracks to her name, only 3 throughout the whole series. Peach Circuit is a completely uninspired beginner track, there's really nothing noteworthy about it. Peach Beach is a bit more interesting, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still pretty unremarkable. The Cataquacks are some of my least favourite enemies, but honestly the rest of the track is somewhat interesting, and the beach section has a cool gimmick. It's just never felt satisfying to drive through the water. Then the very best Peach track is only in B tier, so overall Peach just doesn't have many good tracks. Peach Gardens is pretty fun when it's the Wii version. The layout of the track is a lot more enjoyable, as I feel this is a genuinely difficult track to master. Still nothing crazy here, there are just so many better tracks in the series. And overall, Peach doesn't have many tracks, so therefore the average rank of her tracks turns out to be 50 out of 72. Now, I'm kinda surprised Luigi is worse than Mario, cause both these characters tend to get the more basic beginner tracks, but I feel as if Luigi also gets some pretty great tracks to his name. Luigi's Mansion is my favorite of his tracks, as even though I've never played the original games, it's just such a cool theme that is executed so well. The DS version feels a bit lacking, with many sections not living up to their potential, but I feel as if the 3DS version spruces it up a bit and just makes it way more enjoyable to play. Additionally, I think one of the best GBA tracks is Luigi Circuit. For how that game controls, I feel as if the track takes full advantage of the looser controls, and ultimately it feels like one of the more satisfying tracks in the entire game. Most of the time I feel like a 3D remake of any 2D track is gonna be the best version, but this track genuinely feels best in Super Circuit. But ultimately, the reason why Luigi is ranked so low is because his beginner tracks really suck. Luigi Circuit from Wii is the exception to this, but it's really nothing spectacular, just a decent beginner track. Then we come to Luigi Circuit from GameCube and Luigi Raceway. These are tracks I would actually consider bad. Luigi Raceway is one of the most boring tracks in the series. It's a basic raceway aesthetic with no shortcuts or any challenge to it. This track more than outstays its welcome. Luigi Circuit has its merit as a unique idea, but ultimately the course layout is just too simple, and I feel as if the wide middle road doesn't really allow for its main gimmick to shine. Luigi has some really good tracks to his name, and I feel if I were to really love his better tracks, he would have definitely outranked Mario. But even though Mario has a lot more average tracks to his name, Luigi just has too many really bad tracks, which gives him an average rank of 48 out of 72. Not gonna lie, this is the character that I thought would get last. Purely because Mario has some of the middest tracks in almost every entry in the franchise. The Mario circuits from Super Mario Kart are pretty bad tracks on the SNES, at least compared to the more refined 3D entries in the series. But I have to admit that Mario Circuit 2 and 3 have pretty good remakes. I especially love how Mario Circuit 2 implemented the glider ramp at the end. Just having this shortcut alone makes this track so much fun to play. Mario Circuit 3 is also decently fun. This is definitely one that grew on me over time. Just driving it within Mario Kart 8 makes it feel so much more intense and frantic. But I can't say the same for the other Mario circuits with no remakes. Mario Circuit 1 is an absolute snooze fest. It's the first track in the series, so I guess it's acceptable, but it does not help its ranking here. And Mario Circuit 4 is something that would go over pretty well as a remake, but holy shit, I do not enjoy it within Super Circuit. It's just so frustrating to play. So just an FYI, I played all the Super Mario Kart tracks with no remakes in Super Circuit, because this game has every Super Mario Kart track within it, and Super Circuit is just generally a more enjoyable time than Super Mario Kart, at least in my opinion. Anyways, then we have the classic Mario Circuit track, which is pretty much a staple of every game in the series. The only problem is, these tracks tend to be some of the blandest tracks in the series. Mario Kart 8's version is probably one of my least favorite tracks from what is otherwise a stellar track selection. I know people like how it's essentially the 8 in the logo of the game, but I know from experience, anytime Nintendo tries to make a track look like an 8, it absolutely falls flat. Mario Raceway tried to spice things up by, instead of being a generic Mario Kart track, it became a generic racing track. Its layout is still pretty eventful with plenty of shortcuts, but it doesn't really escape the curse of the Mario circuits. That is that 7 out of 10 Mario circuits are C tier and below. The exceptions to this are pretty much most of the Mario Circuit remakes from Mario Kart 8. DS's Mario Circuit is a standout track. Being included in the Star Cup allowed this course to be a lot more difficult than other Mario circuits. The piranha plants that shoot fireballs are a great enemy, and I feel as if the Mario Kart 8 version makes them way more threatening. The whole forest section is a spectacular revamp of the course. It has plenty of opportunities for shortcuts, and it's up to you how risky you want to make them. The GBA Mario Circuit is truly nothing special in its OG game, but the Mario Kart 8 remake transforms this track into something that has no right being this good. The scale of this track is amplified by the anti-gravity section, and aside from having great turns all throughout the course, the ending section is always hectic with how many ways you can get ahead. Although this course is in C tier, I think Mario Kart Stadium is the perfect example of a beginner track. It introduces the anti-gravity in such a natural way. Most beginners will easily be able to follow this track and get used to the different paths you can take. Whereas Mario Kart veterans can still appreciate the multiple ways of optimizing this course. I love any track that has a shortcut with a maze of pipes to navigate. It allows you to constantly improve how well you take the shortcut. Toad Circuit is another great example of this, but we'll get to that track later. So when I'm looking at the tier list, it's still kinda hard to believe that Mario isn't last, cause so many of his tracks end up at the bottom, and there's nothing higher than B tier. But I guess Mario's averageness has kinda saved him from the bottom of the list, as most of his courses are in the middle of C tier, so overall his average rank is 47 out of 72, which turns out to be one rank higher than Luigi, proving once again, Luigi will always be in the shadow of Mario. Much like Peach, Daisy seems kinda forgotten within the Mario Kart series, only having a total of 3 courses. To be fair, Daisy having less courses is more reasonable than Peach, but for someone who has such a strong personality and aesthetic to her, I feel as if she was let down by only having 3 tracks. Also, none of them are flower themed, which is just kinda dumbfounding. Daisy Hills is my favourite of the bunch, as this track has a really great glider section. I absolutely love flying through the hot air balloons, and discovering the shortcut was a really great moment for me. I still think the track is a bit simple, but for a Mushroom Cup course, it definitely delivers. But the reason why Daisy's at the bottom of this list is because that's the only track I really like from her. Daisy's circuit is pretty much over before it even begins. I like the Switch version a lot more after playing it quite a bit. I especially love the ending of this track, as optimizing the high speed turn and also cutting the corner on the pavement has become this track's best moment. But overall, I just don't think the rest of the track is anything special. Now, this is definitely one of my more controversial opinions, but I do not enjoy Daisy Cruiser. It's definitely Daisy's worst track. Mostly due to its confined, awkward hallways, long stretches of nothing to do, and its total abundance of shortcuts. I think the theming of this track is absolutely perfect, and just saying Daisy Cruiser is instantly recognizable. But ultimately, I feel as if Daisy has a pretty average spread of courses. One good one average one, and one not so great one. Resultantly, this gives Daisy an average rank of 46 out of 72. I wouldn't say Shy Guy is really a main character in the Mario series, but he definitely has his fans, as he's been a mainstay in the character selection ever since the DS. Personally, Shy Guy Bazaar has to be his best track. It's really cool to see a track based on the Middle East, without being one of those shit city tracks that just acts more like a tour rather than an actual race course. The marketplace is something we'd see explored in other city tracks, but I feel as if the multiple paths really make this section stand out as the most iconic part of the track. And that's why this track is not too high up, as I feel like the rest of the track is a bit forgettable. The glider section is really boring, when I feel as if it could have been on par with Daisy Hills. If the Shy Guys on the flying carpets actually obstructed the path, this track would have been way more exciting. Shy Guy Falls is an impressive track on first impression, but for someone who's been playing Mario Kart 8 for close to a decade, the spectacle of this track has started to wear off. And don't get me wrong, I still think this is a good track. I just feel that the end of the course tends to feel really clunky and awkward. This shortcut here always gets me killed, it's not even worth it. And lastly, there's Shy Guy Beach. From my memory of playing this as a kid, I thought this would be a really scary and tense track, but it is a cakewalk, and the lack of challenge coupled with its simplistic design puts this one very low on the ranking. So overall, Shy Guy has some good tracks that kinda miss their potential. This results in these courses with great ideas only really achieving nothing higher than B tier. And then Shy Guy Beach just completely weighs down the average rank to 45 out of 72. Much like Shy Guy, it's hard to really say if Koopa is a character. He's more like a type of enemy. But regardless, I've decided to count any enemy that has at least 2 tracks to their name, and Koopa has 4. And the reason why he's so low on this list is because there is a huge divide in quality with his courses. Let's start off with the first S tier track of this video, which is Koopa Cape. Do I really need to explain why this is a masterpiece? The river section of this course is so simple yet so complex. I love how you're incentivized to stay in the river for a speed boost, but you're given so many different ways to go about this section that you never really follow the same path, especially if you have a boost. It was so refreshing to see the tunnel section in its full glory. It adopts the same principles as the river section, as the middle of the pipe has a flowing water source, but the challenge here is cranked up to 100. Trying to survive the water stream whilst dodging the lasers is exhilarating, and I'll never understand why they got rid of this section in both the remakes. Then we have Koopa Troopa Beach up in A tier. I can't really describe why I adore this track so much, as it's kinda just a big loop with a couple of obstacles and tough turns. But the shortcut in this track has to be one of my favourite throughout the whole series. It's very difficult to pull off, but coming out this waterfall just clicks with me, as it feels like a secret passage that you'd never discover on your first couple of playthroughs. Also, the Mario Kart 7 version of this track is just really polished, and the water mechanic shines really well in this course. But on the other side of the spectrum, we have the Koopa Troopa Beach courses. These are just straight up terrible courses. The DS remake makes Koopa Beach 2 a bit more tolerable, as it's good practice for snaking in the boring sections, but goddamn this section sucks. It's really difficult to make out these pits, and they just feel like an unfair punishment. Then, Koopa Beach 1 takes the cake for the most nothing track in the series. I don't hate it as much as other controversial tracks in the series, but there's nothing here to hate or like. It's just a short loop with annoying water physics. So if it weren't for the Koopa Beach tracks, which were one of the main themes in the original game, Koopa would be way higher on this list. But ultimately, the average rank of this widespread of tracks ends up being 37 out of 72. So far, most of the ranking has been extremely close, with 10th to 14th being split by 5 positions. But it is even closer here, as we have a 3-way tie for 6th place. But this is an average rank, so there's a slight difference between these 3 characters. I'll show the decimal places for these next 3 characters to show how close it ended up being. Much like Mario, at least one Bowser track has been featured in every entry of the series. Bowser, however, has the most amount of character tracks, coming in at a total of 14 tracks across 8 games. Once again, this is mostly due to the older games, featuring up to 4 Bowser's castles in one game. Then of course, each subsequent game featured a Bowser's castle near the end of the Special Cup. First off, I need to talk about Bowser's Castle 2. This is the only F tier character course. I absolutely despise this course and its bullshit difficulty. The controls of Super Circuit are a bit better than Super Mario Kart, but it does not help how difficult it became to even place in the top 4. The track is so tight, I always found myself bumping into walls, then losing like 4 positions just because of that. People usually hate this track for its useless turn into lava, and whilst that kinda pisses me off, you can easily avoid it after one mistake. But this frickin' section here is one of the most awkward and frustrating things to navigate. It's just straight up bad track design. Like, it's not a natural path to take at all. Bumping into a wall is a 90% likelihood. And the thing that pisses me off even more is how there's an item box in this obscenely difficult turn. Like, clearly it's there because it's the more challenging route, but this whole section is impossible to navigate in the first place. Sometimes I would slow down to try and get the item, but I would still miss it because it's just so precise. And normally it wouldn't piss me off that much, just missing one item box. But this item box is one of 2 throughout the entire track. That is absolutely dumbfounding. Why is there only one item box that's easy to get in the whole track? It makes driving become the most critical part of beating this track. And driving this track is one of the most frustrating things I've ever had to experience within Mario Kart. Now, on top of having the worst character track, the 2D Bowser tracks happen to be some of the more blander tracks in the series. The similar aesthetics of these tracks don't do them any favors, and even though a lot of these Bowser Castle tracks have 3D remakes, they're really just making the controls better and not really improving on the groundwork. But then we come to the 3D Bowser castles. I love that the series abandoned the flat overused theme and rather opted for each track to be a one-off special event in the Special Cup. Every single 3D Bowser's castle achieves a great standard of quality. I especially love N64 Bowser's Castle. This track feels like a bunch of different challenge rooms put together through a cohesive theme. The way you have to react to the thwomps really gets you thinking and planning out your move. Whereas most tracks use thwomps as a way to guide you through the track, these thwomps make you constantly reassess where to go. The end section is also phenomenal, as much like the thwomp section, never really get to take the same path, having to avoid the lava streams and walls. Doing this little shortcut at the end is something I always go for. It rewards track knowledge more than any other track I can think of, and it's still quite difficult for not much gain, but the satisfaction of pulling it off is immense. A lot of people seem to not really enjoy the 3DS Bowser's Castle, and that I do not get. This is the most diverse Bowser's Castle with plenty to offer. I feel as if a lot of the other Bowser's Castles tend to blend together a bit. Not saying it's bad, but with Wii's Bowser Castle, I barely remember the layout aside from the giant Bowser statue and the wobbly entrance. This is the same with Mario Kart 8's Bowser Castle, and even the GameCube one. The 3DS version features this sick water section that twists and turns between rocks, ramps, and lava. It also features a challenging shortcut that isn't very obvious. Side note, I love shortcuts that aren't immediately obvious. Things that take a bit to discover, then even longer to master, are my favorite types of shortcuts. Ribbon Road is a perfect example of this, and even something like this shortcut from Grumble Volcano really appealed to me. A-tier is pretty much filled with Bowser Castles. The DS Bowser's Castle is overall a solid experience. But you know it's all about the spin and log. Whenever I think about Mario Kart DS, this is one of the first images that comes to mind. It's absolutely iconic and needs to be brought back. But lastly, I want to talk about how special Bowser Castle 3 is. Like I said before, the old 2D Bowser Castles are pretty shit. Most of the remakes for them couldn't build upon them, and resultantly, they're mostly in C tier. But Bowser Castle 3 is a shining example of how changing something that didn't work in the past can create a whole new vibe for the track. Anytime a SNES track would come out for the Booster Course Pass, I feel as if everyone would roll their eyes. But it just goes to show that these tracks have so much potential if Nintendo actually tries. This is now an exhilarating course with so many different ways to experience and optimize it. Anti-Gravity Twist makes this stand out compared to the basic remakes. And I hope Nintendo can learn from this that staying faithful to a track's original design is not always the best thing to do. So much like Mario, Bowser has a wide spread of tracks, mostly ending up in C tier. Personally, I would have given Bowser 6th place because I feel the best of his tracks outshine the bad tracks significantly. But ultimately, this tier list was my ranking, and Bowser just missed out on 6th place with an average ranking of 36.35 out of 72. It's so weird that characters like Cheep Cheep have more courses than main characters like Rosalina, Waluigi, and Toadette. But in having a character that exclusively lives in the ocean, you definitely get more of an established theme for their tracks. Surprisingly, my favourite track is Cheep Cheep Island from the GBA. Much like Luigi Circuit, this is a course that belongs on Super Circuit. It's pretty difficult to get the hang of, but when you do, it's an extremely exhilarating course. I love how you can skim on the water for a bit to cut corners. It makes it so you can always get better at this course. I would have loved to see this in the Booster Course Pass, as even though I just said this track is suited to Super Circuit, if this was given proper care, a remake of this would be absolutely magical. Cheep Cheep Beach is another solid track. It's gorgeous within Mario Kart 8, and being able to properly drive through the water makes it a lot cooler. The worst Cheep Cheep track isn't even that bad. At the top of C tier is Cheep Cheep Lagoon. I see this as a perfect introduction to the water mechanic of Mario Kart 7. It's a simple wide track that lets you get used to the different physics. It has this little seaweeds you can trick off, so you get a better feel for how floaty the game becomes. Then you can risk getting an item by timing when you go past the clam. I really love the shortcut you can take in this section. It's one of those things that takes a while to discover, but is very cool once you do. Additionally, there's another path split where you can either take a risky path to the glider or just go back in the water. Overall, it's a simple track with a lot of hidden complexity, which is the perfect way to make an introductory track. So unlike Bowser, Cheep Cheep is probably the most dense when it comes to overall rankings, with the top track being at 32 and the bottom being 43. So although Cheep Cheep doesn't reach anywhere near the highs of Bowser, they have a consistent average ranking that only just allows them to beat Bowser. Their average ranking comes to 36.33 out of 72. So Yoshi ends up taking 6th place by 1 decimal place, and that's because Yoshi has a similar spread to Bowser but with only 5 courses. The best of this has to be Yoshi Circuit. It's kinda wild that just tracing the outline of a Yoshi resulted in a challenging yet satisfying course to drive. There are constant twists and turns, and this section here is one of my favourites to traverse. It's a bit awkward, but after playing this track for a while, I still find it somewhat difficult to drive efficiently. That's why having a mushroom or star in this area is really effective. The shortcut at the start is honestly kinda broken, as you pass so many people doing it, but because it's at the start of the lap, it isn't a game ender, unlike, let's say, Cheeseland. Then there's the universal highlight of the booster course pass, Yoshi's Island. This is a track that exceeds any expectations I had of a Mario spin-off track. It's so detailed in its world and course design. I love how much effort they put into references, and how it can have a major impact on the track. The glider section is a great showcase of this, as it implements the cloud whilst also giving you something to do in the air, as opposed to most gliders that just have you going from point A to B. I would have loved to put this course in S tier, as it ticks all the boxes for a great adaptation. However, I don't feel as if the track design is worthy of S tier. It's still a remarkable track though. Yoshi Valley is good, but not because of its main gimmick. It's actually a really cool concept, and I love how a lot of Mario Kart 8's tracks subtly implement this element of multiple different paths. Most of the time it's just a two-way path split, but it works wonders for replayability. With Yoshi Valley's path splits, it feels more like a gimmick than an actual track. If the paths offered different types of challenges that involved different mechanics, it would have worked a lot better. Like for example, imagine if one path used mushrooms, the other goes underwater, and another involves a congested gliding section. It would allow for the player to choose a path based on what suits their playstyle. What we end up with is one path that is clearly superior, and is probably the only challenging path to take. Therefore, every race plays out the same. In saying that, I don't hate the superior path. I love how crammed the bridge can get, and the rest of the track is fun with an amazing shortcut at the end. But like most ambitious tracks, it feels like the groundwork rather than its full potential. Then we have the bad Yoshi tracks to help balance out his score. Yoshi Falls isn't overly bad, except for how the waterfall can just kill you, but nothing about this track is generally any good. Yoshi Desert is the same. It's definitely a track we need a remake of, because I feel like the Super Circuit version is limited by its 2D nature. Half the time I can't really see what's happening on the ground, but it sorta looks interesting. And this being a desert track does it no favours. Visually, it's a mess, and aside for the giant Yoshi Sphinx in the background, there's no landmarks or distinctive sections to this track. So all things considered, Yoshi does have some of the more iconic tracks in the series, with Yoshi Island being a standout. If Mario Kart tracks are anywhere near as good as that in the next installment, it's gonna be a great game. Overall, Yoshi's ranking comes to 36.2 out of 72, technically beating out Cheep Cheep and Bowser by 0.1 of a ranking. Honestly, all these characters have an equal ranking in my eyes. I'm kinda shocked there was a three-way tie in the first place, but for this video's sake, it just made more sense to properly rank them, and now have a more complete ranking. Piranha Plant feels like another weird inclusion, but if Smash Bros can do it, why can't Mario Kart? Piranha Plant being more of a side enemy only has 3 courses to their name, with 2 of them coming from Mario Kart Tour. Now one of these tracks appeared in the final wave of the Booster Course Pass, but for some unknown reason, Piranha Plant Pipeline was left out, now becoming the only Mario Kart Tour track that has never returned. Hopefully they add it to the next Mario Kart, but for now I'll have to play a custom track of this course, cause frankly there's no chance I'm getting Tour just to play this track. Now, I don't know how accurate this track is to its original, definitely not completely as this course is kinda unfinished, but of what I experienced, I'm confused on why they never brought this one back. It's an absolute blast for a concept that hasn't been fleshed out like this before. Piranha Plant Pipeway explores the sewers, but this course feels way more confident in its core idea. Driving up and down the pipes reminds me of Cooper Cape in all the best ways. There's even a section where you have to stay in the middle to maximize your speed. speed. Flying into different pipes is this track's best moment. I don't know if one way is necessarily faster, but this really elevates the idea of extending the split paths that Mario Kart 8 utilizes. I really love this course for how it sets out to do something no other Mario Kart track has really done before. It's still a bit lackluster in many sections, but the vibes of this course are spectacular, and I'd love to see a proper remake of this. Piranha Plant Cove is clearly the weaker Tour track. I get why it was added, as it's one of Tour's first original courses, but it definitely feels too simple for Mario Kart 8. The wide, empty roads, coupled with the almost grid-based track design, makes this track more than outstay its welcome. The third lap is more interesting, and overall there's some good elements sprinkled in, however I'm just bored for most of this track. But then we come to the best Piranha Plant track, Piranha Plant Pipeway. This is a course that keeps growing on me. After I post this video, I'll probably want to put it higher, but for now, the top of B tier is pretty accurate. This exploration of the sewers not only ends up being a great homage to the underground theme of the Mario Bros series, but just a fantastic idea for a Mario Kart track. I love how in the first section, item boxes flow down the stream with you. Getting one of these can really help you out, and collecting it tends to be pretty difficult. The giant piranha plant is a great threat, and I only recently discovered that they swap between facing left and right. So when they're facing left, you can get as close as you want to the right side to make it to this section. It's wild that I'm still discovering new things about a game I started playing in 2014. The underwater section is alright, but this level's finale is really where this course shines. The feeling of shooting out of the sewers into a Mario Bros themed area elicits so much joy. Then of course, the shortcut through the fake bush is amazing. This one's pretty obvious to discover, but mastering it is really what matters, because if you mess this one up, you are absolutely screwed. Overall, Piranha Plant has a pretty solid lineup of courses. Even though I was talking shit on Piranha Plant Cove, it's still pretty high up in C tier. Only having one mid-track gives Piranha Plant an average ranking of 33 out of 72. Now, objectively, Toad is the best character in the Mario series. I won't have anyone arguing with this, it's just straight up true. But despite this, sometimes Toad isn't given the best tracks. I feel like a lot of the mushroom themed tracks could have been given to Toad. Like, I get they just want to make themes without giving it to the characters all the time, but why is Mushroom Gorge not a Toad track, and somehow Toad's factory is? Like, why does Toad own a factory? This man shouldn't be let within 200 meters of a factory, let alone own one. I don't know why I said that. He's okay. But in all honesty, who cares if the track ends up being one of the best in the series? I love how every section is so full of life. The platforms are moving, boxes are being shuffled around, item boxes are being crushed into form, and conveyor belts are moving back and forth. This is a track that feels overwhelming at times, and it's very surprising Nintendo considers this a Mushroom Cup track, because avoiding everything and doing well in this course is still difficult to this day. The final mud pit is a great example of this. I still struggle to line up which way to go, because you really have to plan how to hit these boost pads in quick succession before they disappear. Toad Harbor is another fantastic track. It always feels busy, and I feel like the multiple path splits have a lot to do with this. Almost every section in this course gives you multiple routes to take. The start gives you the bridge or the boat, then you can either go on the top of the tent or skillfully maneuver between the poles. More advanced players can take the higher narrow path to just barely take a shortcut. Then you can either use the anti-gravity wall or just follow the tram along the road. The final section is an open area with item boxes and coins scattered all throughout to get you experimenting with what path to take. And for the very end of the track, there's another split path. It's kind of wild to realize how many split paths there actually are, because usually I just take the path I'm used to, but I do see the value in going whatever way you want, as it allows you to play to your playstyle. All around, this is a fantastically thought out track, and the attention to detail with world building makes this one of the most impressive tracks in all of Mario Kart 8. Toad's Turnpike is interesting. I want to love this track, as if you've seen any of my Booster Course Pass videos, you'll know I adore tracks with cars on the road. Shroom Ridge ended up being my favorite Booster Course Pass track, and that's mostly due to how intense the cars make the rather simple track design feel. It fits really well within that course because you're constantly needing to weave around traffic, whether that's to take shortcuts, to avoid items, or just simply traversing the course efficiently efficiently. Toad's Turnpike doesn't really achieve the same intensity, because it uses the most boring layout imaginable. If anything, this track is a testament to how amazing car tracks are, as without them, this course would be an F tier, much like Figure 8 Circuit. But with the cars, I can at least say some moments are pretty fun. The N64 version is surprisingly the superior version, purely due to how difficult the course is. Because there are more cars in a tighter area, avoiding them is extremely difficult. And for most races, all the cars seem to compound at the end, making for some of the most clutch finishes I've had in Mario Kart. Toad Circuit is the clear outlier in Toad's track selection. It's truly nothing special, and it's kinda weird that it was chosen for the booster course pass. I really have nothing to say about this track, cause like most beginner tracks, there's not much to dissect. And I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. So ultimately, what gets Toad such a high spot is a pretty positive spread, with his worst track only being bland at worst. Toad had one track in every tier except D and F, so his average rank comes to 29 out of 72. Coming in third place is Wario. So despite having, in my opinion, the best character track, Wario has a total of 6 tracks spread between C tier and S tier. Mount Wario is his magnum opus and is arguably one of the best tracks in the entire series. The idea of splitting up the track into 3 sections was a fantastic idea initiated by Mario Kart 7. But here with Mount Wario, it feels as if it's reached its potential. The first lap is the most exhilarating in my opinion. Despite it not being as varied as the other laps, its slippery surface coupled with the winding slope makes for a very tight and intense race. The second lap just throws idea after idea at you, while still sticking with the track's theme. The dam section makes a good reason for anti-gravity existing, as not many tracks seem to push the anti-gravity mechanic to create new scenarios. Like most of the time, it just expands the track and where you can go, whereas I feel very few courses create something memorable from their anti-gravity. The dam section is just a tiny piece of the track, but it really shows how they put no section to waste here. The forest section after the dam is another great area, as it has multiple path splits and a very difficult forest to maneuver. Finally ending the race with a classic downhill ski slope. Not to sound cliche, but it really does make the track feel alive, as you feel the rush in this section. This is where you make those final items count. Mount Wario is a course I just can't understand anyone hating. It had it all and is willing to do things that other tracks haven't done before. Wario Goldmine is another favourite of mine. Whilst not quite deserving of S tier, the Wii version really bumps up my view of this track. I kind of forgot how difficult this track was. There's not too many differences, but just having the minecarts as an obstacle transforms this section into something way more fun than its remake. It makes getting the items behind them actually challenging, and doing the shortcut is way more rewarding. Wario Coliseum was a course I decided to play on the Wii, and this is because I want to reserve my first time playing Double Dash for another video. So for now, I just used a custom track. But honestly, I had so much fun with this course within the Wii version. I'm kinda surprised they never brought this one back, because with tricking now becoming a staple of this series, it just makes so much more sense for this to have been a remake. Regardless, I love the challenge posed in this course. It feels similar to Wii Rainbow Road in that sometimes it's very easy to fall off, but the course demands you to drive precisely on this constantly winding path with many tricks and ramps. Wario Stadium is another great track that the Mario Kart 8 version cleaned up and made a lot more satisfying. Wario Shipyard is a surprisingly great track for one that is primarily underwater. There's a lot of moving parts, and integrating the pirate theme into the course is done masterfully. All these courses together would have given Wario an average ranking of 13 out of 72, putting him just after first place. But there is one infamous track still left over, and that's Wario Stadium from the N64. Now this is a course that isn't as bad as everyone makes it out to be. Sure, it's pretty long and empty, but I still do have some fun whilst playing this course. I like the motocross vibe, and although there isn't any tricking mechanic in this game, going off the ramps is still satisfying. This is also a good course to get good at. I'm terrible at Mario Kart 64, but over the course of playing this track, it felt good to master the turns that I'd been failing laps before. But yeah, it's still a pretty awful experience compared to everything else the game had to offer. I think that this course has a lot of potential to come back as a fully updated stadium track, but it'd take a lot of modifying to make it fun. So Wario ends up losing one position because of this course, but in all honesty, I definitely think he deserves second place, purely because there are way more tracks that are great here than what second place has. But that's just how averaging the rank of the character goes, so ultimately Wario has an average rank of 21 out of 72. Waluigi only just makes it to second place, not because he has a mix of great tracks, but mostly due to him only having 2 courses across the entire series. It seems like the meme of Nintendo forgetting about his existence also applies to the Mario Kart series. But let me just say, in this case, that is not a problem, as the 2 tracks he does have are both standout tracks. Waluigi Pinball is iconic. It has a few faults that make me question its reputation as one of the best in the series, but I can't deny that most of the course is so creative with its track design. The moment where you're weaving in and out between the pinballs is the highlight of the track. You either have to be fast or mindful of where the pinball will be. I love how it feels to drive this section, and the music definitely adds to the intensity. The pinball section is unique, and I have to give it credit for creating something so iconic, but I do not love this section. I wish I had more experimentation tied to it, because I feel like I'm just kind of driving forward hoping I don't get hit, and sometimes you just can't avoid a pinball from behind. The track also doesn't have any shortcuts, which definitely lowers its rank, but overall it's still a fun track. Wario Stadium is really where his tracks peak. Like, the Mario Kart 8 version of this is so perfect. Every section feels complete, with different ways to tackle it. You can go about this track normally, following the obvious path, or you can use its mechanics to get a lot more out of it. I love how the half pipes are used effectively here, as many tracks just put them in for their item boxes. Here you can use them to completely change the track. Since I've been playing this game for a while, I've been able to find so many little tricks that continue to make this course more exciting. Jumping over this section at the start is one of my favourite shortcuts in the game, but more recently I discovered you could do this. For any skill level, this is a track that keeps giving, as there's never really any downtime in this course. It's so phenomenal and has pretty much given Waluigi second place. I still think that Wario should be second, but ultimately Waluigi only has great tracks to his name. Hopefully Nintendo can remember who he is and create more tracks for him, but for now he's sitting at an average rank of 15 out of 72. So the main inspiration for making this video was a thought I had whilst playing one of this character's tracks. I thought the competition for first place would be somewhat close, but in all honesty, there was only ever one winner, and that's Donkey Kong has a total of 5 courses, and 3 of them are in S tier. I think that says enough about the quality of his tracks. DK Summit would have to be my favourite, as its commitment to the theme brings so much adrenaline-filled moments. I love how the half pipes are useful for cutting around the corners and add a lot of momentum to the course. The ramps are fun to go off, there's plenty of shortcuts, and there's a great amount of challenge injected. The gap jumps have become some of my favourite shortcuts to pull off, and in online lobbies, it's essential to get this down pat. The end of the track is always chaotic, with many different ways to traverse it, and so many hazards. DK Mountain also feels pretty similar in design, as you launch out of a cannon, then head downhill for the rest of the track. I keep switching between these 2 tracks on which one is my favourite, but they're basically the same quality. This track even has a gap jump, which, much like the last track, is a really satisfying shortcut. I love how wide the track starts off, with it being pretty easy to avoid the boulders, but as it goes on, the track narrows and becomes a lot more challenging. The bridge at the end is also a highlight. There's been so many intense finishes due to how close everyone is. The final S tier track is DK Jungle. This is a perfect homage to Donkey Kong Country Returns. I'm a big fan of that game, so all the references stick out to me. But without that, the track design is so varied and interesting all throughout. The enemies are consistently difficult to dodge, there's a difficult shortcut to take that doesn't require a mushroom, and the ending is such a clever idea. Having a split path with one path being clearly faster, but making it such a risky option is a really cool way to finish the track. It's kind of like the shortcut from Piranha Plant Pipeway, where if you mess it up, you're gonna lose a lot of places. It's cruel, but it makes this track so much fun. DK Pass is an overhated track in my opinion. I wouldn't even say it's his worst track. I really love the windy path to the top of the mountain. It can be pretty difficult to stay on the path, especially with the icy physics. The snowballs add a lot of excitement to the more lacking sections, kinda like how Waluigi Pinball does it. And how can I forget the special item box? I had Mario Kart DS as a kid and played the absolute crap out of that game, but I never discovered this shortcut, so you can bet I was shocked to find out about this for the first time. Lastly, DK's worst track is ranked 26 out of 72, so he really doesn't have any bad tracks. DK Jungle Pathway has a lot of great elements to it. The jump over the lake is so epic. Even though I think the N64 version is a little bit worse than the Wii version, this jump across the lake is way more engaging, as you can angle where you jump off the ramp to cut off some time. I get why they got rid of this, cause it's not featured anywhere else in Mario Kart Wii, instead opting for a cannon. But the Wii version makes the jungle area feel way better. I love how you can jump over these curbs and get some sick airtime. I love this bridge for all the same reasons as DK Mountain, and it being even narrower just makes this such a great spot to use items. Like, avoiding the bullet bill here was something I actively had to think about. The problem with this course is how these great moments are spread between a lot of nothing moments. It's not too bad, but I'm definitely not as engaged as other DK courses. But now I can show you the entire tier list I made for this video. It's crazy how much DK just fills up S tier, with every other character only having one track in S tier. So ultimately, Donkey Kong is the winner with an average rank of 12 out of 72. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I'd love to see who you think has the best character tracks in the comments, and if you have any other ideas of Mario Kart rankings based on weird criteria, I'd love to hear it, as this video was so much fun to make. But anyways, peace out.